He used to warm his hands on my cheeks like I was his home. Now, even his touch felt like frostbite. The sun was barely up, casting pale light over the boxes scattered in my small apartment. I knelt on the floor, folding the last of my winter sweaters into my suitcase clothes I didn't plan to wear again for a long while. I had made up my mind. I was leaving. Not just the apartment, not just the city. I was leaving everything behind. As I zipped up the suitcase, the front door creaked open behind me, unlocked, as always. The same careless habit that used to make me feel like I lived with someone who trusted the world. Now it just made me feel exposed. A familiar presence crept in. Suddenly, cold hands slid over my eyes from behind. "Guess who I am?" he whispered in a deep, magnetic voice that once sent shivers of comfort down my spine. Now it just made my stomach twist. Julian. In the past, I would have smiled and leaned back into him. I would have giggled, "Of course it's you, Julian," and rubbed his hands warm. I used to find comfort in these little rituals. They were the breadcrumbs of our love. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't play along. I reached up calmly and removed his hands from my eyes like they were someone else's. "I'm busy," I said, my voice flat. Julian froze. I didn't have to turn around to feel the shift in the room. He lingered behind me for a moment, unsure of himself for the first time in a long time. Then slowly, he stepped forward, lowering himself onto the sofa. "Ava, are you still angry? It's been a month." I kept folding clothes, ignoring the bitterness in his voice. He sounded like the victim, like I had wronged him by falling silent after he married someone else on our wedding day. "I had to explain to so many people," he continued. "You burst into the wedding venue like that. Do you know how embarrassing that was for everyone?" I stopped folding. A dry laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Embarrassing? What he called embarrassing was the moment my entire world cracked in half. A month ago, I stood before all our relatives, holding a bouquet, wearing a white dress. I waited on a man who swore he loved me, only for him to walk down the aisle hand in hand with Olivia, the woman he once told me not to worry about. I didn't just lose a groom that day. I lost my dignity, my mother, and any illusion I had that love meant loyalty. I was the one who had to explain to the guests, I said, my voice low but sharp. "You walked in holding her hand, and you looked so proud." Julian's face tightened. "It wasn't like that. Olivia's fiancé backed out last minute. Our families have history. I had no choice. It was to protect the relationship between our companies." I turned to him for the first time, my expression cold. "So, I was expendable, just a placeholder until her fiancé bailed." He flinched, as if my words hit somewhere deeper than he expected. "It was business," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated quietly. "But you did, and you didn't stop." He looked down, ashamed. At least he tried to look like it. Then his eyes shifted to the gray wool sweater in my suitcase. Clumsily, he picked it up and began folding it like he wanted to pretend everything was normal. "This one's ugly anyway. You should throw it out." I snatched it back. "My mother knitted this for me by hand before she died." His hand stilled. I saw guilt flicker across his face. It wasn't just the wedding that broke me. It was the way I was thrown out of that venue like a crazy woman. People whispering behind their hands. A girl almost 30, publicly dumped, crying like a child. And the worst of it, my mother had a heart attack the same day. She didn't survive the humiliation. Julian didn't even come to the funeral. I hadn't cried since, not once. Grief dried up somewhere deep, turned into something hard and sharp instead. Now he sat here, in the home we used to share, acting like we could fold sweaters and fix things. "Ava," he whispered, "let's not end things like this. Just take some time. Don't go." "I'm not taking a break," I replied. "I'm leaving." He blinked. "Leaving? For where?" I zipped the suitcase shut with a loud final sound. "I accepted an international assignment. Expatriation. I leave in 48 hours. Silence. Then, what? He stood, suddenly tense. "You didn't even tell me? When did you decide this?" "The day you married her." The weight of the words hung heavy between us. Julian's fists clenched. "So that's it? You're just going to run away?" I met his eyes. "No, I'm finally moving forward. There's a difference." He looked lost, like a man realizing he left the stove on after the house had already burned down. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it, and the expression on his face softened something tender and ridiculous. It was Olivia. "Hey baby," he murmured into the phone, his tone gentle and loving. "I just got home. Yeah, I'll be there soon. Don't worry. I'm just tying up some stuff. I stood and walked to the window. Below, her red sports car was already waiting. Julian followed my gaze. Then, like a guilty schoolboy, he slipped the wedding ring off his finger and stuffed it into his pocket, pretending like it never existed. When he turned back to me, he smiled like he used to. I got you a small gift from the trip. I'll bring it by tonight. I didn't answer. The door shut behind him, and I finally breathed. Not because I was free from him yet, but because for the first time, I wasn't afraid to be. I didn't sleep that night. My suitcase was packed, my resignation ready to be submitted, but my mind refused to shut down. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. It was the kind of silence that clung to you, not peaceful, but empty, like something had been scraped clean inside me. At sunrise, I got up, showered, and dressed neatly. I wore a black blazer and pressed pants, my hair in a low bun. The same version of me Julian once said looked too intimidating for a girlfriend. I no longer cared. I wasn't dressing for him. I arrived at the office early. Whispers followed me as I walked through the hallway, each one like a needle. Isn't that the woman who crashed the wedding? I heard she went crazy, made a whole scene in front of everyone. Wasn't she on a bereavement leave? What is she doing back? The words didn't sting the way they once would have. I had lived in the ashes long enough to forget the burn. I knocked on my manager's door, Lucas, a woman who had once been an intern beside me, now promoted while I stayed stuck for years. She glanced up from her screen, her expression unreadable. "You're serious about expatriation?" she asked, taking the form from my hand. "I wasn't sure you'd go through with it. You said you didn't want long distance, that you wanted to stay for Julian." I smiled politely. "Things change." She nodded slowly, then scanned my form. "Well, you're qualified. You've done the work. The company approved your online submission, but we still need a face-to-face with the executive rep from headquarters. They'll be here tomorrow. Just show up, make a good impression. You'll be out of here in no time." "Thank you," I said, and left the room. As I stepped outside the building, I turned back one last time and looked up at the skyscraper. I had spent 10 years here, gave up promotions, turned down international offers, just so I could be with Julian. I used to think love meant sacrifice. Now I knew better. Julian's company had flourished. Mine had not. He had grown in influence, wealth, and admiration, the golden boy in every meeting. I was always in the background, the girl behind the great man, but I had been the one pulling double shifts, managing crisis after crisis, covering for his late arrivals, helping him climb the very ladder he kicked me off of. He was the one who used to say, "I can't do any of this without you," until Olivia came back. That was the day everything began to unravel. She returned from abroad like some character in a romantic drama. Childhood friend, long-lost connection. She was everything I wasn't: charming in crowds, fluent in flirtation, belonging to the same world of wealthy elites. The night she landed, Julian left me sick in bed to pick her up. Later, drunk at her welcome dinner, he held her hand across the table and refused to come home with me. And when I protested, he accused me of being controlling. "I've known her since we were kids," he said. "You're the newcomer, Ava." That line etched itself into my bones. 2 months later, Olivia handed him a wedding invitation, her own. Her fiancé had bailed. The next thing I knew, Julian was sliding a spoonful of soup into my bowl one evening and casually said, "Let's get married." No ring, no warmth, just a line meant to counter Olivia's wedding plans. Desperate not to lose him, I said yes. Like a fool, we never made it to the registry office. He said he forgot his household register. I believed him. Then came the day of the wedding, not mine, but theirs. I arrived in my dress, heart pounding, only to see him standing at the altar with her. I thought I would die right there. After the funeral, after the shame, after the whispers, I finally understood. He never chose me. I was the filler. Now, as I walked home from the office, cold air stinging my cheeks, I didn't feel regret. I felt something else rising in me, something sharp and unfamiliar. Freedom. I reached my building and climbed the stairs slowly. But just as I was about to enter, a loud voice rang out from behind me. "Ava?" I turned around. Julian. He looked disheveled, hair wind-tossed, coat barely buttoned. He was panting, like he had run all the way here. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He held up a small velvet box. "I forgot to give you this yesterday." "I didn't take it. I don't want it." "You haven't even opened it." I don't need to, I said. I know it's not mine. His face twisted. You think I gave you Olivia's ring? I raised an eyebrow. Should I check the engraving inside? His hand dropped to his side. Ava, don't do this. You're angry. I get it, but you still love me. I blinked. No, Julian. I used to love you. Now, I'm just trying to get away from you. You can't, he said, desperation seeping into his voice. You and I, we've been through everything together. We built our lives around each other. No, I said. I built my life around you. You just watched. He reached for me, but I stepped back. You're still mine, he said quietly, like saying it aloud would make it true. I never was, I whispered. Then I turned and went inside, leaving him standing on the steps, a shadow of the man he used to be. But the truth was, that man never existed. He was just an illusion I clung to for far too long. And now, I was finally ready to let go. The next morning, I arrived at the company early again, this time not to work, but to finalize everything for my departure. My resignation had been internally processed, and today, the executive from headquarters would be evaluating expatriate applicants face-to-face before the official transfer. As I stepped into the main lobby, whispers floated again, familiar tones, but unlike before, I didn't flinch. She's here again? Didn't she cause a scene at a wedding recently? I heard she's quitting. Finally realized she has no future here. They didn't realize I had heard worse. Words had stabbed harder. Julian's silence during my lowest moments had hurt more than any gossip. I made my way to the top floor conference room where the expatriation review was scheduled. Lucas greeted me with a rare smile and handed me an iPad. Just wait here for the executives. Don't worry, your file is solid. I told them you're one of our best. I gave a polite nod. I didn't owe her more. I had just sat down when a sudden commotion rippled through the floor. High heels clicking, a man's voice. A group of assistants rushed to the glass doors and opened them. Julian walked in with Olivia beside him. My chest tightened for a moment, not because I missed him, but because I hadn't expected them to be here. What are they doing here? I asked under my breath. Lucas looked surprised. Didn't you know? Julian is the new president of headquarters, and Olivia, vice president. I froze. Just like that, the two people I had run away from were now holding the keys to my next chapter. Julian's eyes found me almost instantly. His confident walk faltered. Olivia, as always, maintained her grace, her smile soft, eyes calculating. Lucas stepped forward to greet them. President Julian, Vice President Olivia. It's an honor to have you here. Julian waved the pleasantries off and scanned the room. Who are the expatriation candidates? Lucas called out 3 names, mine included. Julian's eyes flickered with something unreadable. When Olivia heard my name, she tilted her head and smiled faintly. Ava? Oh, you're still applying for expatriation? I met her gaze. Yes, the paperwork's all approved. She turned to Julian, her voice honeyed. Darling, wasn't she on marriage leave last month? The room tensed. All eyes turned toward me. Julian's face was unreadable. Lucas, caught in the middle, stammered. She initially applied for marriage leave, but changed it to bereavement. Her mother passed away. There's no record of a marriage. Julian's mouth opened slightly. His eyes locked onto mine like he was trying to read something I wasn't saying. When did she? He whispered. But before he could finish the question, Olivia stepped in. I think there's a mistake. Our company doesn't allow expatriation for married women or those with dependents. Isn't that right, Julian? My fingers tightened around the edge of the iPad. Was she trying to block me? Julian stayed quiet for a long time. Then he pointed at me. She's married. She registered with me. Lucas blinked in confusion. But she didn't submit a marriage certificate. And Julian, your household register was never taken out for any registration. Julian's gaze darkened. His lips trembled. No, I went with her. I remember. I stood up, calm and clear. No, Julian, you forgot your household register. Then you went to try on suits with Olivia. Silence blanketed the room. William, Julian's father and the chairman of the Julian Group, walked in at that exact moment. What's going on here? Everyone stiffened. Julian quickly straightened his posture. Dad, Chairman, I was just clarifying a personal matter. William ignored him and looked directly at me. Ava? I gave a respectful nod. I've read your file, he said. Clean, unmarried, no dependents. All qualifications are in order. There's no issue here. Julian's face turned pale. Proceed with the expatriation, William said flatly, and walked out. Lucas exhaled. Well, that settles it. But Julian wasn't finished. As everyone began returning to their stations, he approached me, low and furious. You lied, he hissed. You told me we registered. You lied to yourself, I replied. He stared at me, stunned. You couldn't even commit to a date without second-guessing yourself. You were always half in, Julian. I just stopped pretending that was enough. His breath caught. For once, he had nothing to say. Ava, Olivia said, stepping closer. Are you sure you want to go? There's really nothing for you here? I turned to her. I don't run from my past. I just don't let it chain me anymore. And with that, I walked out of the room. The next morning, I boarded the plane. Julian tried to call me 3 times. I blocked him before we even taxied down the runway. I wasn't leaving because I was broken. I was leaving because I was whole again. The sky outside the airplane window turned a dull gray as we descended. I rested my hand gently on my lap, tracing the edge of my coat sleeve. My phone was off. I didn't want to hear from anyone, especially not Julian. The plane touched down with a soft jolt. And for the first time in what felt like years, I exhaled, truly exhaled. A new city, a new country, and finally, a life that was mine alone. Emma, a colleague I'd met years ago at the company, waited for me at arrivals. She waved excitedly, her short bob bouncing as she ran over. Ava, you look amazing, damn. Like someone who left all her baggage in another country. I smiled faintly. Some of it tried to chase me to the airport. She laughed and grabbed one of my suitcases. Come on, boss wants to meet you tonight for dinner. He's been talking about poaching you since the day I got here. The car ride was warm, soft music playing in the background. This city was calmer, cleaner, more distant from the weight I'd carried for years. I looked out the window as the streets flew by, thinking of how easily Julian used to talk about our future, while still hesitating to make any of it real. How many chances had I given him? How many times had I rewritten my dreams to make space for his? We arrived at the apartment the company had arranged for me. It was modest but elegant. Pale wooden floors, neutral walls, and wide windows that bathed the living room in golden light. It was everything my old place wasn't. Open, quiet, peaceful. Emma helped me unpack while filling me in on everything I'd missed. Team gossip, company shifts, the city's hidden gems. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of something warm again. Not joy, not yet, but peace. Dinner that night was formal but friendly. The company president, Mr. Lang, was a thoughtful man in his late 40s with a sharp mind and a surprisingly kind heart. He spoke to me like an equal, not like someone doing me a favor. I've seen your numbers from the last 2 quarters, he said over a glass of wine. Clean work, sharp instincts. Why were you never promoted before? I didn't answer right away. Emma jumped in. Company politics, she said with a shrug. She was too good. Someone felt threatened. Mr. Lang didn't press, just nodded. Well, that won't happen here. You'll get what you earn. Those words. I didn't know whether to smile or cry. A week passed. Then too, I began falling into a rhythm: work, gym, late night walks along the river with a warm cup of tea in hand. I even started writing again, not for anyone, just for myself. Then, one afternoon, Emma walked over to my desk with her phone in hand. You're not going to like this, she said. She turned the screen toward me. A video was going viral: Julian and Olivia on a red carpet, holding hands, cameras flashing. Olivia in a sleek emerald gown, Julian in a tailored suit. They smiled like they were royalty. A banner behind them read, Julian Group welcomes the next generation. Official pregnancy announcement. I stared at the screen, my chest oddly still. Emma grimaced. Ava, I'm sorry. I set the phone down. Don't be. I meant it. Because I didn't feel pain anymore. What I felt was clarity. Julian wasn't mourning what we had. He was parading what he found more valuable. For years, I thought I lost a man who loved me. But in truth, I had only lost the fantasy I built around him. And as it turns out, fantasies don't bleed. Over the following months, work consumed me in the best way. I was promoted within 6 weeks to a senior executive role, a position I had applied for 5 times back home and never received. Here, they didn't ask me who I was dating. They looked at my numbers, my ideas, my execution. Everything I had been doing for years was finally being seen. Then, as autumn melted into winter, something else changed. His name was Henry. He joined our department as a financial advisor, transferred from the Shanghai branch. Quiet, thoughtful, always reading during lunch breaks. We first spoke during a coffee spill, mine unfortunately. I apologized a dozen times, dabbing at his sleeve with panic. He just laughed and offered to buy me another cup. "It's not like you meant to. Happens to the best of us," he said gently. That's how it began, slowly, naturally. Henry never asked about my past, never tried to fix me. He just listened, made space, offered warmth without strings. One evening, after a company dinner, we ended up walking home together in the snow. The world was hushed, blanketed in white. He handed me his scarf halfway through and said, "You always act like you don't need help, but it's okay to accept it sometimes." I smiled. "And what if I forget how? Then I'll remind you." That was Henry. 1 year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand ceremony, no red carpets, no paparazzi, just a quiet garden, a few close friends, and 2 people who finally stopped running from their own shadows. And now, another year later, as I sat in the quiet apartment we shared rubbing my barely there baby bump, I smiled at how far I had come. From being abandoned at the altar, to building a life that didn't just look beautiful, it was beautiful. Not perfect, but real. A knock at the door pulled me out of thought. I opened it and found a delivery, a bouquet of soft white tulips. A card tucked into the flowers read, "Just because. Love you always, H." I placed them in a vase and whispered under my breath, "This is what love should have felt like all along." And then my phone rang. Unknown number. For a second, I hesitated. Then I answered. "Ava?" The voice breathed. It was Julian. I didn't speak. Not right away. I just held the phone against my ear, stunned by the weight of that single word, Ava. Julian's voice hadn't changed, still smooth, still deep, but there was something underneath it now. Strain, exhaustion, maybe even regret. "What do you want?" I finally asked, my voice calm. He exhaled heavily, like hearing my voice had knocked the wind out of him. "I didn't think you'd answer. I tried calling so many times. I blocked you." "I know." A pause followed. I could hear faint sounds in the background, wind, traffic, maybe the hum of a car engine. "I saw your photo," he said quietly. "Online, a conference. You were on stage presenting. You looked different." I offered. "Happy. I am." Silence again. I looked down at my hand resting gently on my belly. The faintest flutter beneath my skin, a reminder that my world was no longer his. "I'm back in the country," Julian said. "I had to come for a business acquisition. I didn't expect to see you everywhere. In articles, reports, your name's on everything." I didn't respond. I didn't owe him comfort. "I wanted to talk to you," he continued. "Just once." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." There it was, the line. The one I used to dream about. The one I thought would undo all the pain if I ever heard it. But now, it felt like an old key to a door I'd already locked. "Julian," I said slowly, "you didn't make one mistake. You made 100 small ones. You chipped away at me for years. The wedding was just the final blow." "I know." "No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have called." His voice cracked. "I thought I was choosing the right path, that I had to. My dad said Olivia was the only way to inherit the company. I didn't want to lose everything. You didn't want to lose control." That shut him up. I let the silence stretch, because he needed to feel what it was like to sit in discomfort, something he'd always avoided. "She left," he finally said, his voice low. "Olivia left me 6 months ago. She filed for divorce." My brow lifted, but I said nothing. "She said I was too cold, that I never really loved her, that I was chasing someone else, even when she was standing right in front of me. She's not wrong." Julian gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Maybe I deserved it. I've lost the company too. My father sold off majority shares. I'm just a board member now." I closed my eyes. So that's why he was calling. Not love, not remorse, loneliness, loss. "Ava," he whispered, "are you happy?" I opened my eyes and looked around the room. My warm apartment, the vase of fresh tulips, the baby's sonogram on the fridge held by a tiny magnet shaped like a star. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I am." He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Are you with someone?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to lie, but I didn't feel the need to explain myself to him either. "I'm not alone," I said finally, "and I haven't been for a long time." He exhaled again. this time shaky. I wanted to tell you in person. I came to the city. I'm staying near the company branch. I stood up, suddenly cold. Julian, please. Just one coffee. 10 minutes. That's all I ask. I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But something in me, not longing, not hope, but a desire for closure, made me pause. I'll let you know, I said. Then I hung up. That evening, I didn't mention the call to Henry. He had just come back from a long day, and he looked exhausted. I made him dinner. We laughed. We cuddled on the couch. And later, when he rested his head on my lap, talking softly to our baby like she could already hear him, I realized something important. Julian was the past. Henry was the now, and the future. The next day, curiosity won. I agreed to meet Julian at a quiet cafe near the Riverwalk. Public, open, and far from where I lived. I arrived early, wearing a fitted beige coat and a cashmere scarf. Nothing showy, but sharp, powerful. He walked in 5 minutes later. I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was longer, a bit messier. His eyes, once so full of arrogance, looked tired, dimmed. There were faint lines at the corners of his mouth, like life had finally stopped sparing him. He stopped when he saw me. Wow, he breathed. You look different, I said again, stronger. He sat down slowly, ordered black coffee without asking me what I wanted. Some things never change. We talked, mostly about the company, the projects we used to run, the people we knew. He tried subtly to slip into old familiarity, a joke here, a shared memory there, but I didn't bite. Finally, he leaned back and looked at me. I miss you, he said. I don't. His lips parted slightly, stunned. You don't get to miss me now, Julian. Not after everything. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. You didn't just break my heart. You broke my spirit. You left me to deal with everything: my mother's death, the public humiliation, the ruined career alone. And you were off drinking milk tea from Olivia's straw while I was packing up my life. Julian's eyes glistened. I didn't know. I didn't think you'd ever really leave. That was your mistake, I said. You thought I would always stay, no matter how little you gave. But I finally gave myself something better. He swallowed hard. Is there someone else? I looked him straight in the eyes. Yes. That was when he saw it. The faint curve of my belly. His gaze dropped, froze, then slowly lifted back to my face. Your yes. His voice cracked. Is it mine? No, Julian. She's not yours. She never was. He looked like someone had kicked the ground out from under him. His eyes flicked between my face and my belly as if trying to piece together a timeline that no longer mattered. Then who? He started, but I cut him off. My husband. Julian's lips parted slightly. His throat bobbed with a hard swallow. You got married? I did. There was no pride in my voice, no cruelty, just truth. He blinked a few times. And you didn't think to tell me? I smiled, but not out of amusement. I didn't owe you that. Just like you didn't think to tell me when you slipped that ring onto Olivia's finger while I was still wearing mine. His face tightened. That was different. No, I said. It was the same. The difference is I didn't show up at your honeymoon to make you feel guilty about it. He looked down, shoulders tense. I guess I thought, maybe one day, you'd come back. And do what? I asked softly. Be your second choice again? Your fallback? Julian didn't reply. Do you even know what love is, Julian? He looked up, surprised by the question. You called me because you lost everything, not because you missed me. You're lonely. You're stripped of the attention and power you once had. And now you're trying to find something familiar, something you could control. His voice was hoarse. That's not true. It is. And that's okay. People don't change until they lose something that mattered. A pause. Did I matter? He asked. I didn't rush my answer. You mattered. Once. Deeply. But I've moved on from the girl who needed your validation. He stared at me, speechless. You didn't just cheat on me, Julian. You erased me. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. And when my mother died, you didn't even show up at her funeral. His voice trembled. I was ashamed. No, I said. You were afraid. He let out a slow breath, then looked at the table. I guess I didn't expect you to be this strong. Neither did I admitted. But I learned the hard way. He tried again. Maybe we could just be friends, Julian, I said firmly. Stop. He froze mid-sentence. I'm not here for closure or to fix anything. I came so I could look at you one last time and realize I don't love you anymore. His expression cracked. For once, completely unguarded. I stood up, sliding my chair back slowly. Take care of yourself. Ava, wait, but I was already walking out. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind greeted me like an old friend. Cold, honest, cutting through all the layers I thought I still needed to protect myself. I touched my stomach gently, then texted Henry, me. All done. Want to meet at home? The reply came almost instantly. Henry, already waiting with your favorite soup. Come back safe, my queen. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't fade after a second. The kind that lives in your chest. That night, I told Henry everything. He listened quietly, his hand never leaving mine. I'm glad you met him, he said when I finished. I blinked. Why? Because now you'll never wonder what if. You've closed the door. He was right. 3 months passed. The final trimester was difficult, but not unbearable. With Henry's care and my own peace of mind, I felt stronger every day. Then, on a rainy afternoon, our daughter was born. She arrived quietly, as if she didn't want to disturb the world, but the moment she cried, I felt my soul bloom. When I held her for the first time, I didn't think of Julian. I didn't think of the heartbreak or betrayal. I only thought, this is what love is supposed to feel like. A few days later, after we returned home from the hospital, I received a package. There was no sender name. Inside was a jewelry box. I opened it to find a pair of ceramic rings custom made. On the inner rim of one was engraved, J&O. My breath caught. He had sent me the wrong rings. Or maybe he hadn't. I remembered the day he threw that same box against the wall during our fight, swearing he'd had them made for me. Clearly, he hadn't. The letters were clear. I almost laughed. It was so Julian rewriting stories to protect his own ego. I snapped the box shut and tossed it into the trash. Later that week, a friend messaged me a headline from a finance news site. Julian Group acquired by former competitor founder's son ousted from board. I read it once, twice, then put my phone away. No emotion, no reaction, just quiet acceptance. Life had given him what he couldn't accept from me, consequences. A few weeks later, I stood by my mother's grave, cradling my newborn. The wind was softer that day, like she was near. Mom, I whispered, we're okay now. I'm okay. You don't have to worry anymore.
The baby yawned in my arms. I smiled. As I turned to leave, a figure stood a few feet away. It was Julian, again. His clothes were wet from the rain, his eyes red. He stepped forward, but I didn't let him get close. I came to say goodbye, he said, voice shaky. I didn't reply. I'm leaving, for good this time. Overseas, I nodded, then goodbye. He looked at the baby. She's beautiful. She is. He hesitated. Will you ever forgive me? I tilted my head, then said softly, I already did. His eyes filled with something like hope, but I crushed it gently with the next words. Forgiveness isn't the same as a second chance. I forgave you. For me, he swallowed hard. Take care, Julian, I said. Then I walked away. Time passed. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months. My daughter began to smile, a real gummy smile that made everything else disappear. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with such innocent trust that it sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Henry was the kind of father I once thought only existed in books. He changed diapers, sang lullabies with the wrong lyrics, and insisted on reading her finance articles aloud like bedtime stories. Our house was filled with quiet laughter, soft music, and the gentle rhythm of ordinary happiness. But peace, I realized, had to be protected, because even now, remnants of the past tried to crawl back in. Julian messaged me again, not from his old number. He had to change it after being hounded by reporters when the acquisition story broke. He used a business email this time. Subject, no reply expected. Just read. The message wasn't long. He said he had left the country as promised. Said he was working in a small firm overseas, far from the spotlight. That he was indeed contacting me to beg or hope or guilt, just to say he finally understood everything I used to feel. I spent my whole life chasing things that sparkle. I thought power would protect me, but it just made me careless with the people who truly mattered. You were the only real thing I had. I didn't lose you because of Olivia. I lost you because I never treated you like you were someone I could lose. I closed the email, deleted it. I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. He was no longer trying to rewrite our story. He had accepted it for what it was. Finished. And so had I one evening. As I was preparing to return to work from maternity leave, Henry sat across the kitchen table reading an article on his tablet. You know, he said casually, our daughter's birth announcement got published in the company bulletin. There's a cute little note from the HR team. Everyone's calling her our company princess. I laughed. That's the most corporate nickname I've ever heard. She's already more popular than me. That's saying something. I looked at it, then at the life we built, and wondered if it would ever happened if Julian hadn't broken me first.
But the truth is, I didn't become strong because of Julian. I became strong because I chose to rise. He just gave me the silence that forced me to hear my own voice. A month later, we visited my old city. Henry had a conference, and I tagged along to see Emma and a few old friends. I didn't expect to run into anyone from my past, but fate, as always, had its own script. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Henry was at his meetings, and I had just taken my daughter to a park near the hotel. She was asleep in her stroller, bundled in a fluffy pink blanket. As I reached for my coffee on the bench beside me, a voice called out, "Ava?" I turned. It was Olivia. She looked different, still polished, still dressed to perfection, but there was a stiffness in her smile, a shadow in her eyes. "I thought that was you," she said, walking over slowly. "Wow, it's been a long time." "It has." Her eyes flicked to the stroller. "She's yours?" I nodded. "Yes." "She's beautiful," Olivia said softly. "Looks like you." I gave a brief smile, not willing to play along longer than necessary. Olivia hesitated before sitting on the other side of the bench. "Julian told me he saw you," she said after a moment. "That you moved on." "I did." She stared ahead. "I envy that." I looked at her, then truly looked. Her makeup was perfect. Her coat was designer, but she looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, like someone who had been chasing a high that no longer existed. "I thought winning meant keeping him," she said without me asking. "But the truth is, I never really had him. Not fully. He was always somewhere else." I didn't reply. She continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought marrying him would make me feel like I mattered, like I was finally chosen. But love isn't a competition, is it? It's not something you win. It's something that has to be given freely." Her words surprised me. For years, I had painted her as the villain, the woman who smiled while I bled. But now, I just saw another broken girl who thought love was a prize. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, turning toward me, "for everything. I didn't expect that. And I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I did say, thank you. And that was enough." She stood, brushing off her coat. "Take care of yourself, Ava. You too." As she walked away, I looked down at my daughter still asleep, unaware of the quiet war that had just ended. I bent down and tucked the blanket around her tighter. "This," I whispered, "is what peace looks like." I spent the rest of the afternoon strolling through the city, visiting quiet corners of my past, places I used to cry in, hope in, wait in. But this time, I didn't carry the weight. I walked through them as a visitor, a woman who had lived, learned, and left. Sometimes, I admitted, not in a wishing way, more like, how did I survive that kind of way?" He nodded slowly. "I get that." There was no jealousy in his tone, only understanding. "That version of me," I continued, "the one who waited, begged, bent herself to fit into someone else's shadow, I mourned her for a long time. I thought I lost something when I let her go." Henry looked at me, steady and loving. "But now I see, she was just the cocoon." He reached over, gently kissed my forehead. "And you're the butterfly." I chuckled. "Cheesy." "Completely," he agreed. "But still true." Our daughter cooed between us, a soft noise of contentment that filled the quiet room like a lullaby. And for the first time, I realized something even deeper. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is remembering without rage. It's returning to old wounds and finding they've scarred over reminders, not infections. One morning, months later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. "Julian." I considered throwing it out, but something in me, curiosity, maybe convinced me to open it. It wasn't long. Just a few lines, written in his usual sharp, slanted script. Ava, I saw the interview you gave last week. You looked radiant. You spoke like someone who has found her place. I wanted to say thank you, not for what we had, but for walking away when I didn't have the courage to. It taught me more than you'll ever know. I wish I could say I'm happy for you, but I'm still learning what happiness means. Maybe one day I'll get there too. Julie and I folded the letter slowly, then tucked it away in the drawer where I kept old photographs and mementos. Not because I wanted to revisit it, but because even ghosts deserve a quiet corner to rest in. A week later, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership summit. The theme was reclaiming your story. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of women from different walks of life, I began. There was a time when I measured my worth by someone else's gaze. I thought love meant sacrifice, that shrinking myself was the cost of staying. I paused. The room was silent, but here's the truth. Love never demands that you become less. Real love, whether from a partner, a friend, or yourself, asks you to grow. I saw heads nodding, eyes glistening. I walked away from a man I thought was my future, but I found something better. Myself. Applause thundered across the room. And somewhere deep inside, the last remaining thread that tied me to my old self finally snapped gently, quietly. Because I wasn't her anymore. I was me. Unapologetically. The summit ended with a standing ovation. Women I had never met approached me afterward, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles that said they saw themselves in my story. They thanked me not for being perfect, but for being honest. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Survival isn't just making it through. It is coming out on the other side and using your voice, the one you once muted, to light the way for someone else. That night, back at home, I sat by the window with my daughter nestled against my chest. The soft hum of Henry preparing tea in the kitchen filled the background. Outside, the city sparkled, no longer intimidating, just alive. I whispered to her, "You don't know it yet, but you changed everything." She stirred, letting out a tiny sigh. I kissed her forehead. I hoped she would grow up never knowing what it was like to beg for love, that she'd never dim her light for anyone's comfort, that she'd have the strength to walk away from anything that made her feel small, just as I finally had. A few months later, I received an unexpected invitation. A major business magazine had chosen me for their Women to Watch feature. They wanted to do a full spread photos, an in-depth interview, even a video spotlight. I nearly said no, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't think I needed recognition anymore. But then I thought, maybe it wasn't just about me. Maybe someone somewhere was still sitting on a cold floor with a suitcase in front of them, wondering if they had the strength to leave, to start over. Maybe they needed to see that it was possible. So I said yes. The shoot took place in a sunlit studio. They dressed me in white and gold, not because I wanted to look rich or untouchable, but because those colors symbolized rebirth, the new me. When the article came out, it went viral. The comments flooded, and not just from professionals and colleagues, but from women who had been through their own heartbreaks, betrayals, reinventions. I didn't respond to every message, but I read every single one, because I remembered what it felt like to have no one believe your pain, to be told to move on before you were ready, to be seen as dramatic, overreacting, too emotional. Now, I stood as proof that healing wasn't just possible, it was powerful. One evening, while preparing for a quarterly review at work, Emma walked into my office holding a magazine. "I thought you might want to keep a copy," she said with a wink. On the cover was a photo of me, not stiff, not posed, but real. Hair wind blown, eyes focused, a small confident smile tugging at my lips. The headline read, "From Rock Bottom to Boardroom, Avalia's Journey to the Top." I didn't know who came up with that title, but it felt right. Henry came by later that night to pick me up. He brought our daughter, now toddling on unsteady legs. She ran into my arms and babbled something that sounded suspiciously like "Mama win." I laughed. Yes, baby, Mama did win. As we walked to the car, I saw a familiar face across the street briefly, barely. A man stepping out of a small restaurant, alone, hands in his pockets. Julian. He looked thinner, older, like life had stopped pampering him. Our eyes met for only a second. He didn't wave, neither did I, but he gave me a nod, a small, honest one. And I nodded back. There was no bitterness, no unfinished business. We had both closed our chapters. Back home, after putting our daughter to bed, Henry poured us both a glass of wine. "To surviving?" he asked. I shook my head with a smile. "To thriving," We clinked glasses, and I leaned back on the couch, feeling the weight of everything I had carried and let go. Later that week, I received a final letter. No name on the envelope, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was short, only one sentence. If I had known the price of loving you too late, I might have loved you right the first time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I folded it, slipped it into the same drawer with his first letter, and closed it. Some things weren't meant to be rewritten. They were meant to stay in the past. The final days of that year were quiet, peaceful. My company announced my promotion to regional director. Henry surprised me with tickets for a small family getaway. And one morning, while watching my daughter scribble crayon art on the floor, I picked up my journal and wrote, "I thought my story ended when he married her, but that was only my beginning."